It was the kind of death that didn't make headlines. An 87-year-old woman found lifeless in her hospice bed at a Whitmore family clinic, hands folded neatly over her chest, eyes closed as if still dreaming. Her name was Margaret Langston, a widow, Sunday school teacher, and beloved grandmother of 6. Her chart read, "Cause of death, natural causes." But 5 feet away, standing in the sterile white light of the room, Nurse Hannah Morales swore she saw something different in the moment Margaret passed. A single tear rolling down her cheek, and just before that, a flicker of terror in her eyes, as if she knew she wasn't supposed to die yet. 6 months earlier, Dr. Charles Whitmore was untouchable, with salt and pepper hair, a Harvard medical degree, and the smile of a man who remembered your birthday. He was the kind of doctor people still trusted with their lives. His clinic sat nestled in the historic part of Ashcroft, Massachusetts, a town of old churches, cobblestone sidewalks, and gossip that traveled faster than ambulances. To the town, he was more than a doctor. He was Doc Charlie, sponsor of Little League teams, donor to the local food bank, and proud recipient of the Rotary Club's Citizen of the Year award. He delivered babies, comforted the dying, and even set a broken leg with a snow shovel during a blizzard once. People said you could feel better just sitting in his office. No one questioned him until Margaret Langston died. The suspicion: Hannah Morales had been a nurse for 7 years, kind but blunt, raised by a single mom who worked double shifts at a diner. She didn't scare easy, but something about Margaret's death gnawed at her. The patient had been stable, talking just the night before, and yet, by morning, she was gone, serene and cold, with a medication log that said she received her nightly pain dose from Dr. Whitmore himself. Hannah checked the cabinet. The bottle was nearly empty. Too empty. Still, she said nothing. Who would believe her? Dr. Whitmore didn't make mistakes. He was the kind of man who hand-wrote condolence letters, the kind of man who prayed with families. But 2 weeks later, another patient, a diabetic man in his 50s, died in his sleep. Again, Whitmore had administered meds. Again, the file said natural causes. Hannah didn't believe in coincidences anymore. The plot twist. Late one night, Hannah stayed after her shift, under the pretense of catching up on paperwork. She waited until the cleaning staff left, then quietly unlocked the drug storage cabinet with her spare key. It was off the books, she knew, but what she found turned her stomach cold. 2 vials of midazolam, a powerful sedative often used for terminal sedation, were logged as expired in the system but were freshly dated. One was half used. Neither should have been in this clinic. Tucked behind the vials was a slip of paper. It wasn't a prescription. It was a handwritten note, folded once, stained with what looked like dried coffee. Sometimes it's a mercy. They don't want to suffer, and I can't keep watching them scream. See, that night, Hannah drove home in silence, both hands shaking on the wheel. She didn't know what was worse, the idea that her boss might be a murderer, or that he might think he was doing the right thing. The emotional twist. At Margaret Langston's memorial, Dr. Whitmore delivered the eulogy. He spoke with trembling hands, tears in his eyes, recounting her kindness, her laughter, the way she always brought muffins to the staff. "I held her hand," he said to the crowd of mourners, "and I told her she wasn't alone." People wept, applauded. Even Hannah's own resolve cracked as she watched him hug Margaret's daughter afterward. Could a man like that really? But then, his eyes met Hannah's across the room. For a split second, his expression changed. Not warm, not grateful, just a little too cold, a little too knowing. The crime had begun, but no one knew it yet. Dr. Whitmore wasn't killing for money. He wasn't killing out of rage. He believed he was saving people. And soon, he'd save someone else, even if they didn't ask him to. They called it another tragedy. A 56-year-old man, Daniel Hargrove, divorced, diabetic, and recently laid off, was found unresponsive in his recovery bed, less than 12 hours after a routine outpatient procedure. No distress, no code blue, just gone. Dr. Whitmore was the first to find him. Again, the clinic held a moment of silence that morning. Staff moved quietly. The overhead lights dimmed slightly, as if even the building felt heavy with grief. But Hannah Morales wasn't mourning. She was watching. Dr. Whitmore had barely blinked. He walked from room to room with the same gentle smile, offering condolences like tea. He held Daniel's sister while she cried, whispered something in her ear, and made a promise to take care of the paperwork. Then he disappeared into his office and shut the door. Hannah wasn't a detective. She had no badge, no authority, and no hard proof. Just a gut that wouldn't shut up. So she did what no one else had the nerve to do. She started digging. The suspense builds. Daniel's vitals had been stable post-op. Hannah knew. She'd checked them herself. She pulled his file again from the system, fingers tight with tension. Medication, insulin, mild painkillers, light sedative. Nothing fatal, unless he'd been given something off record. Hannah's hands hovered over the locked medication logs. It wasn't illegal for her to check, but it wasn't encouraged either. She typed in her passcode, searched, and unlocked administration of lorazepam appeared at 11:42 p.m. It didn't come from her. It didn't come from the night nurse. Only one other person had access at that hour, Dr. Whitmore. The plot twist. Just before her shift ended, Hannah received an anonymous envelope in her locker. No note, no return address. Inside, a flash drive. She drove home, locked her doors, poured a glass of wine with trembling hands, and plugged it into her laptop. The footage was grainy, recorded from a hallway security camera she didn't even know existed. Timestamp, 11:43 p.m., the night Daniel Hargrove died. The footage showed Dr. Whitmore entering Daniel's room. He wasn't wearing gloves. He didn't carry a chart. He closed the door behind him. 7 minutes later, he left. Calm, quiet. Daniel was dead by morning. The video cut off there, but the message was clear. Someone else saw it too. The emotional twist. The next day, Hannah met Daniel's sister, Leah Hargrove, at a local coffee shop under the guise of helping with paperwork. She wasn't ready to say anything official. Not yet, but maybe she could ask the right questions. Leah was pale, tired, shaking with grief. He was doing better, she said, tears welling. He was finally getting his life together. He told me the doctor, Dr. Whitmore, was giving him something to help him sleep. Said he was having anxiety. Hannah's stomach dropped. He said he trusted him. Leah whispered. He said he'd never felt more safe. There was a long silence. Then Leah reached into her purse and pulled out a folded letter. I wasn't going to show this to anyone, but now it was handwritten, shaky, and unfinished. A note from Daniel, dated 2 days before his death. If anything happens to me, it's not an accident. I think the doctor knows more than he's saying. I think he's giving people things they don't ask for. Hannah looked up, face pale. This wasn't just a theory anymore. It wasn't a hunch. It was real. And someone had died knowing it. The game had changed. Dr. Whitmore wasn't just hiding something. He was being watched by someone else. Someone brave or reckless enough to send Hannah that footage. Someone who might already be in danger. Hannah wasn't alone anymore. But that didn't mean she was safe. Because the doctor knew how to heal. But more importantly, he knew how to make people disappear quietly. The thing about masks is eventually they slip. And when they do, you don't just see the face underneath. You realize you never really knew who was wearing it at all. The flash drive changed everything. After viewing the footage, Hannah Morales didn't sleep. She called out sick the next day. Not because she was afraid of Dr. Whitmore, but because she was afraid of what she might do if she saw him. Instead, she drove to the county sheriff's office. The investigation begins. Detective Joel Ramsey had seen a lot in 15 years. Opioid overdoses, malpractice cover-ups, a few shaken babies he never could forget. But when Hannah slid the flash drive across his desk and said, "I think a doctor is killing people," he raised a brow. Until he watched the video. Until he saw the unrecorded drug logs. Until he read Daniel Hargrove's note. That was when he leaned forward and said, "You're not crazy." They moved quietly. Dr. Whitmore was a public figure. Accusing him prematurely would trigger legal war and public backlash. Ramsey needed more than suspicion, more than a nurse and a grainy video. So he called in the DEA. Over the next month, Whitmore's controlled substance orders were reviewed, coded, flagged. What they found was subtle, but suspicious. Anomalies in dosage requests, A paper trail that hinted at discarded meds that were never actually discarded. Patients who were logged as having received sedatives. They were never prescribed. And something else. A patient who didn't die. The plot twist. Her name was Chloe Abbott, a 39-year-old recovering addict who had been admitted for a panic disorder. She checked out against medical advice 3 months earlier, terrified, trembling, convinced someone was trying to drug her. She left a voicemail on the clinic's emergency line that night, slurred and rambling. He said it would help me, but I told him no. He did it anyway. I think he put something in my 4. The recording had been quietly deleted from the system, but a backup copy existed. Chloe had tried to file a complaint, but the clinic's legal team dismissed her as a relapse risk. Her file was altered, her chart cleaned. Whitmore's notes: patient unstable, likely hallucinatory, refused care, left erratic and incoherent. The problem: Chloe wasn't hallucinating. She still had the hospital bracelet and the bruising on her arm, where an injection had been given without her consent. The emotional twist: Ramsey brought Hannah in to help cross-reference medical files under confidentiality. It was the first time she saw just how many names were on Whitmore's list, and how many of them were already dead. 37 patients, 27 of them listed under palliative or pain management, 10 flagged for compassionate sedation. But here's the catch: none of those patients were terminal. Some had chronic pain, yes, anxiety, depression, but they weren't dying. Not until they met Whitmore. Hannah stared at the spreadsheet for an hour, row after row of names she remembered, people she'd spoken to, hugged, sat with, helped into wheelchairs. Some of them had called her sweetheart. One had painted her a Christmas ornament. Another had asked her to be present when he told his daughter he was getting better. And now they were gone. Quietly, painlessly, suddenly gone. She left the sheriff's office and threw up in the parking lot. Beneath the surface, Dr. Whitmore wasn't just a doctor. He was a gatekeeper between life and death, and he'd been playing God for years. In private, he called it mercy. To the staff, it was efficiency. To himself, it was control. The man who smiled through grief, prayed beside hospital beds, and kissed babies at town fairs. He was methodical, deliberate, and deeply disturbed. But he wasn't stupid, because when the DEA subpoenaed his clinic surveillance system, the hallway camera that had captured him in Daniel Hargrove's room, it had been wiped. The game was on now. Whitmore knew someone was watching him, and for the first time, he was watching back. The courtroom smelled like lemon polish and fear. April's sun poured through the tall windows, but it didn't warm anything. The room was cold, quiet, like a church right before a funeral. Dr. Charles Whitmore sat at the defense table in a crisp gray suit, hands folded like a man at peace. You'd think he was waiting for a business meeting, not the start of a murder trial. He looked like a doctor. He acted like a saint. But today the mask was off. The prosecution's case. The district attorney, Ellen Park, didn't waste time. She opened with the names. 37 of them. One by one, she read them aloud. Elderly, middle-aged, struggling, but alive, until they entered Dr. Whitmore's care. These patients didn't die because of illness, she told the jury. They died because he decided they should. Then came the evidence. Video footage of Whitmore in Daniel Hargrove's room the night he died. Inconsistencies in drug logs. The falsified note in Chloe Abbott's chart. A forensic report showing non-prescribed sedatives in 6 victim systems. A voice recording of Daniel. If anything happens to me, it's not an accident. The jury listened in silence. The defense fights back. Whitmore's lawyer, James Croft, sharp, expensive, and terrifyingly good, argued that this was a witch hunt, that the so-called victims were terminal, paying, and begging for help, that Whitmore had done nothing but what families silently hoped for. You call him a killer? Croft barked. I call him a physician who refused to let people suffer. He painted Hannah as unstable, overworked, emotionally compromised. He claimed Chloe Abbott was a relapsing drug addict fabricating stories. He said the DEA wanted a scapegoat. He said Whitmore was a man of mercy, nothing more. And when Dr. Whitmore took the stand, he delivered a masterclass in empathy. "I never wanted anyone to die," he said softly. "But when someone looks you in the eye, begging you not to hurt anymore, what would you do?" Jurors cried. Even the judge looked shaken. The emotional twist. Midway through trial, Leah Hargrove, Daniel's sister, took the stand. Her voice trembled as she read the final lines of her brother's journal aloud. "He smiles like he cares, but I think he just wants me quiet. Dead is quiet." The courtroom went still. Then something unexpected happened. A new witness came forward, a woman named Grace Milner, who had once worked with Whitmore at a hospital in New Hampshire, years before he moved to Ashcroft. She'd seen a similar pattern: sudden deaths, erased logs, but never enough to prove anything. When she tried to report it, her contract was terminated. She'd stayed silent out of fear. Until now. The verdict. After 4 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for 9 hours. They returned with a verdict: guilty on 6 counts of second-degree murder, on 3 counts of manslaughter, on numerous charges of fraud and illegal distribution of controlled substances. Whitmore didn't flinch. Not when the verdict was read. Not when the judge sentenced him to life, without parole. Not even when Hannah locked eyes with him as he was led away. But then came the final twist. 2 weeks after the sentencing, Detective Ramsey received a call. A small hospital in upstate Vermont had flagged a case from 8 years ago. An elderly patient who died under comfort care, prescribed by a young visiting doctor named Charles Whitmore. The doctor had used an alias, Dr. C. Walters. The patient, not terminal. The meds, matching the same pattern found in Ashcroft. The signature, matched. The case was bigger than anyone knew. Ashcroft was just the last stop. Whitmore had been practicing his version of mercy for years, maybe decades, across state lines, under different names, at different hospitals, and no one had noticed until now. They tore down the clinic 3 months after the verdict. Some said it was for zoning. Others whispered it was cursed. The truth: no one in Ashcroft wanted to walk past those doors anymore. A place that once symbolized comfort had become a monument to betrayal. Children who once called him Doc Charlie now crossed the street when they passed his photo in old news articles. And the patients he claimed to have saved? Their names were etched in a memorial outside the courthouse. 37 names. Some still contested, others too late to confirm. But they were names. People. Gone but finally seen. Hannah Morales quit nursing. She moved out of Ashcroft. Took a job teaching CPR and first aid to high schoolers 2 towns over. It wasn't what she thought her life would look like, but she found a kind of peace there. A life with no locked medicine cabinets. No whispered suspicions. Every now and then, she still woke up sweating, hearing the click of a syringe, seeing the patients she couldn't save, hearing the words Whitmore spoke on the stand. What would you do if you knew they didn't want to suffer anymore? She never found an answer to that, but she knew one thing. She wouldn't have played God. And Dr. Whitmore, he died in prison, 2 years into his sentence. Heart attack. Quiet. Alone. No sedatives. No mercy. Some people called it justice. Some called it irony. And some, disturbingly, called it a tragedy. Because even now, there were those who believed in him. Believed he was only doing what others were too afraid to. A few former patients' families even petitioned to have his license reinstated posthumously. A Facebook group emerged. Mercy, not murder. Remembering Dr. Whitmore. It had over 12,000 followers in the first week. The legacy of Dr. Charles Whitmore wasn't written in science or medicine. It was written in silence. The silence of those who suspected something but said nothing. The silence of systems that protected men like him. The silence of lives that ended without a voice. But now, the silence had been broken.